Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are focusing squarely on U.S. sanctions enforcement.
We really have to.
Because the Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, has just delivered a series of actions that, well, they should send shivers through any global business.
Or any high net worth investor for that matter.
Yeah.
This isn't abstract policy anymore. We're talking about immediate multi-million-dollar penalties and this is the critical part, personal liability.
That's it.
That's absolutely right. So our mission today is to dig into two recent massive public penalties. One is hitting the, modern frontier of finance, a fintech company.
And the other?
And the other is striking right at the bedrock of traditional wealth, a high net worth individual in real estate. We're going to decode what these actions signal about the future of sanctions compliance for you.
Because the rules have definitely changed.
They've changed, and OFAC is showing it has new teeth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the digital asset world. The first case everyone is talking about is this penalty against Exodus movement.
Right, Exodus. They're a U.S. fintech company.
And they just got hit with a major settlement.
A major one. They agreed to pay just over $3.1 million to OFAC.
Wow.
The core finding was 254 apparent violations of Iran-related sanctions. And this was happening between late 2017 and early 2019.
So that's a huge fine for a digital asset firm. But what exactly was the violation? I mean, was it just that their wallet software was used in Iran?
See, it was worse than just passive exposure. Exodus was providing customer support services to users in Iran.
Okay.
Specifically helping them access third-party digital asset exchanges through the Exodus wallet software. But the real problem, the thing that really got them, wasn't the software. It was the active encouragement of evasion.
And this is where it crosses the line from just negligence into something much worse.
Exactly, something willful. OFAC documented that on 12 separate occasions, Exodus staff were completely aware of U.S. sanctions.
They
knew that their exchange partners, who they called Exchange A, were blocking users from Iran. And despite this, the Exodus staff directly recommended that these users obscure their location by using virtual private networks, or VPNs, specifically to evade those controls.
Wait. So the company's own staff were giving instructions on how to get around U.S. law.
That's it.
That knowledge, that complicity, that has to be why the penalty was so large.
Precisely. That active coaching, telling people how to circumvent sanctions, it elevated the entire case. It went from a simple technical oversight to egregious willful conduct. It showed a systemic failure from the top down.
That is a powerful lesson for the entire digital asset space. Now, let's pivot hard to the traditional world, because this is where OFAC delivered, I think, an even bigger shockwave.
This one is startling.
The penalty on a single private individual in real estate.
Yeah, in November 2025, an individual real estate investor acting through a U.S. company was fined $4,677,552.
$4.6 million.
And that figure is the largest penalty OFAC has ever issued against an individual in a public enforcement action. I mean, this is the ultimate example of piercing the corporate veil.
Nearly $5 million out of pocket for a real estate deal. What kind of violation could possibly justify that level of personal liability?
Well, the individual acquired property in Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
That property was linked to a person who was blocked under Russia sanctions. Specifically, Executive Order 12024.
So a sanctioned asset.
A clearly sanctioned asset. And despite this, the investor went ahead and purchased it, renovated it, mortgaged it, and then sold it. They went through the whole transaction cycle.
That sounds like a gross failure of due diligence, but was it just a mistake? Or was there the same kind of willfulness we saw with Exodus?
It was intentional disregard. That's what OFAC called it. Willful.
How can they be so sure?
Because this all happened after the individual received clear, actual notice directly from OFAC that the property was blocked.
They got a letter.
They got a direct warning. And on top of that, the blocked status had been publicly recorded in the Fulton County land records since October of 2022.
So the information was publicly available in the local county records, and OFAC had given a direct warning, and the investor just ignored it.
Not only did they ignore it, but when OFAC served them with a subpoena to investigate, the investor provided inaccurate and incomplete information.
Oh, that's never a good idea.
It's the worst thing you can do. So this wasn't just ignorance, it was outright deceit about a sanctioned asset they were actively managing for profit. The message from OFAC is crystal clear. When we tell you to stop, you stop. Immediately.
And when they ask for records, you cooperate. Completely.
And truthfully.
So we have these two really emphatic warnings. For digital assets, the danger is in, helping people evade sanctions.
Right.
And for traditional assets, the risk is now massive personal liability for willfully ignoring clear warnings. And the fact OFAC can do this, it all ties back to their core authority. Let's talk about the regulatory environment that's enabling this.
Well, OFAC's core mandate, and it's important to remember this, isn't just to punish.
No, it's to change behavior.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is a positive change in behavior to meet U.S. national security goals. And to do that, they rely on foundational mechanisms like the 50% rule.
Okay, let's just refresh that rule because it's so critical for tracking assets that aren't obviously flagged.
So the 50% rule basically says that any entity, a company, a trust, whatever, is considered blocked, even if its name is not on the SDN list.
The specially designated nationals list.
Right. It's considered blocked if it's owned, directly or indirectly, 50% or more by one or more blocked persons.
The rule makes sense on paper, but practically, how can a local U.S. title insurer, who's now clearly in the crosshairs because of this Atlanta case, how can they possibly screen for that? For 50% indirect ownership buried 3 layers deep in some shell company.
Well, it absolutely raises the complexity bar, there's no doubt.
It seems like an impossible burden.
And that's why OFAC is now demanding that the entire ecosystem brokers, title companies, law firms, adopt risk-based due diligence. They don't expect the title insurer to conduct a forensic audit of a Cypriot holding company.
Okay, so what do they expect?
They expect them to check public land records. And if any red flags appear, they expect them to stop the transaction and call OFAC. The individual in the Atlanta case ignored a public record and a direct warning. So the biggest risk is when the flags are obvious and you just proceed anyway.
And that complexity is now being compounded by another massive shift, the new record-keeping rule.
This is a fundamental change to the cost of compliance. It's huge. Effective March 2025, OFAC extended the mandatory record-keeping requirements for certain transactions from 5 years
To 10.
to a full 10 years. And this aligns directly with the extended statute of limitations for violations under IEPA and the Trading with the Enemy Act.
And those are the acts that basically give OFAC its power.
They're the foundation.
10 years of data retention. That is a monumental burden. But it also creates this regulatory impossibility for businesses operating in Europe, right?
It creates a clear, almost existential conflict of law. I mean, think about it. This 10-year rule is in direct conflict with privacy laws like GDPR in the EU.
Where they have that right to be forgotten.
Exactly. Businesses there are legally mandated to delete personal transaction data, often after just 5 years. So now OFAC is telling you to keep it for a decade, which could expose you to massive privacy fines in Europe just to satisfy U.S. regulators.
It's a compliance catch-22.
It is, and adding to that complexity is just the sheer fluidity of the sanctions lists themselves. You can't even rely on static data.
Right, like what we saw in December.
The SDN list volatility we saw in December 2025 is a perfect example. We saw significant removals or unblockings of people and companies tied to Russia sanctions, some under Global Magnitsky, others under the Western Balkans EO.
And then there was that major legislative change related to Syria.
Exactly. The repeal of the Caesar Act. That led to technical updates for Syrian exchanges, oil companies like Arafat Petroleum, and key individuals. But here's the crucial part. While the Caesar Act tag was removed, many of these entities are still sanctioned under other executive orders.
So it's not a clean removal.
Not at all. The list is dynamic. Compliance teams have to monitor this stuff in real time.
Which brings us to the investor context. What are the immediate, actionable signals that investors and operators need to take away from these cases? Let's start with fintech.
Okay, for the digital asset space, the key takeaway from Exodus is that remedial actions are no substitute for getting it right from the beginning.
Meaning?
Exodus invested millions after the fact, hiring staff, implementing screening, training, and that saved them from an even bigger fine.
So they got some credit for cleaning up their mess, but the initial transgression was still very costly.
But the signal is clear. New ventures have to adopt a robust, risk-based sanctions compliance program and SCP from day one.
That means screening IP addresses.
Screening for location, using IP addresses, integrating strong KYC, and ensuring that managerial commitment, that tone from the top, is unwavering. The culture has to be one where no one would ever dream of telling a customer to use a VPN to evade sanctions.
And turning back to the real estate shocker, the fact that OFAC found one individual personally liable for nearly $5 million, That has to be the most important signal for traditional asset managers.
Absolutely. It dramatically underscores OFAC's intensified scrutiny of the U.S. real estate sector. The compliance burden is not just on the banks anymore. It's on all parties.
Brokers, title insurers.
Brokers, title insurers, PropTech platforms, law firms, everyone has to do their due diligence. OFAC is essentially telling the real estate community, ignorance is not a defense, especially when we've put the notice right there in the public county records.
And the threat of personal liability is what really changes behavior overnight.
That's the crucial takeaway. OFAC showed it is more than willing to pierce the corporate veil and hold individuals directly accountable for willful violations. That corporate shield is worthless if you, the person managing it, are acting with willful disregard for the law.
So if these penalties are the fire, the insurance is a world-class sanctions compliance program. Before we get to our trade segment, let's quickly run through the 5 non-negotiable pillars OFAC always emphasizes.
These are essential. They minimize risk and can reduce penalties if something does go wrong. Number 1 is management commitment, the tone from the top that Exodus lacked.
Right.
Number 2, a rigorous risk assessment. 3, strong internal controls like IP screening. 4, testing and auditing to make sure the controls actually work.
And finally.
And number 5, comprehensive training, so no one ever recommends a VPN again.
Okay, that structure is the bedrock. Now let's move to our segment where we pitch an outrageous but plausible trade idea based solely on these regulatory shifts. And of course, this is not financial advice.
Not at all. Just a synthesis of regulatory fallout into a market thesis. Go for it.
Okay, so given the convergence of 3 powerful trends, stricter individual liability, the 10-year record-keeping rule, and real estate becoming a primary target, we think the market is severely underestimating the compliance spend overhaul that's about to happen in the mid-market.
Lay out the trade.
We'd pitch going long a concentrated basket of small-cap, highly specialized enterprise compliance software providers.
Specialize in what?
Specialized in 2 key areas: deep due diligence. So, tools that can efficiently screen for indirect ownership via that 50% rule and secure, cloud-based 10-year data retention, and audit trail solutions.
Why small cap providers and why right now?
Because the big global banks already have these bespoke solutions, but the mid-market is now in crisis mode.
The regional banks, the title insurers.
Exactly. They are suddenly facing multi-million-dollar liabilities for missing a public notice. They can't afford a huge 3-year implementation from a major vendor. They need immediate plug-and-play solutions that can solve these very specific problems.
So the compliance cost is no longer discretionary. It's mandated and it's urgent. This is not a nice-to-have software update. It's a required defensive spend. And that immediate mandated spending creates a high-margin surge market for agile, specialized providers. We think the market for this tech is about to boom.
A compelling pitch rooted entirely in this enforcement fallout. That's a great place to wrap up our deep dive today. We've seen 2 massive enforcement actions, Exodus and fintech and the real estate investor, that firmly establish OFAC's focus on willful conduct and individual accountability.
And all of this is amplified by that new mandatory 10-year record-keeping mandate.
A huge change.
And remember the complexity we noted earlier. With the sheer volume of SDN list removals and updates, that constant monitoring and agility backed by robust tech and unwavering management commitment, that's no longer just a nice goal. It is the true competitive moat for any globally exposed business.
Thank you for guiding us through this challenging but critically important regulatory landscape.
My pleasure.
We encourage you to continue your exploration of these financial regulatory impacts. We'll be here when you're ready for the next deep dive.